G'day everyone, I'm DMac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and this is Between Two Hoops, NBA Fantasy Basketball Show with my co-host, Kayla Fonte. Kayla, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing really well. It's been a massive week in the NBA this week. Week 2 is all wrapped up. How did you go with your leagues?
I won one and I lost the other. So it's a work in progress, but it's been like polar opposites so far, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it's been hectic and so many things happening at the moment, but lots to recap. So let's get straight into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. So let's get into our week 2 review and our week 3 preview. All right, hot performers this week. Number one fantasy player, Anthony Davis. He's been massive for the Lakers. He's come back to what he was previously, just by far and away the number one fantasy player in category leagues and in points as well. So he's just providing all round fantasy value. There's not much more I can say about Anthony Davis. The only question with him, of course, is his longevity with his health as well. So, what do you think about AD?
Well, right now he's the first overall player in points leagues and he's just been on a tear lately. He can give you a double-double any night and his blocks have been insane. I mean, I don't know how sustainable those high numbers are, but still enjoy it while you can, even with those injury concerns too.
Absolutely. And those that may have any concerns around his health long term and sitting back to backs and down the stretch, maybe seeing some games, this is the ultimate sell high moment. But if not, just enjoy the moment. Nikola Jokic, we can't really say too much more about him. He's the number one fantasy guy for the last few years. He's had another massive week this week. So those that went up against him had 4 games of Nikola Jokic. So don't know how you would have gone against him, but I know that most people in the leagues that I'm a part of did go down to this juggernaut of a man.
Yep, I unfortunately had to play Jokic this week and it did not end well. But still, he's a triple double threat. I had him last year and he was amazing. It's sad I couldn't get him again, but amazing player.
Yeah, we don't have to comment too much about him. It's just perennially an absolute all-star here. Wemby, the hype is real. So he had a monster week this week. First round value this week. Those blocks were massive. He had a 40-point game as well during the week. Unbelievable. What can you say about Victor?
Just that his potential is so scary. I mean, we're seeing these stats just after a couple of weeks. So imagine what he can put up over time. So watch out for
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, and those that are in dynasty leagues as well. He's
Mm,
probably close to a number one asset right now. I would
100%.
personally, I would have him above Jokic right now. Just we've never seen anyone like this, and I'm excited for a good reason. There's not much that he can't do. He's unbelievable. Desmond Bain, Memphis had their first win overnight, which is great for them, but he's quietly been a fantastic fantasy asset for those that did pick him up. Second, maybe third round, more likely. He's been close to first round value in category leagues and quite similar in points leagues.
Oh, for sure. I picked him up actually in the third round, and he has been amazing for me so far. He can honestly just do it all, and he's played exactly how we expected him to with Jaw out, and I think he'll carry over a lot of that momentum too, even when he's back.
Yeah, good point there. I know that Jard's coming back probably, 20 odd games from now. So enjoy the moment with Bain. If you can sell high, you do so, but don't give him up for anything less than a third round guy or a second round guy, to be honest, because he's balling right now. Tyler Hero, what can we say? A lot of hype was going into guys like Cade Cunningham, Jordan Poole. We'll get to him shortly. But for Tyler Hero, he was taken probably 2 rounds after some of these guys, particularly Jordan Poole. He's given probably second round value in the first 2 weeks of the season. He's been awesome for the Heat.
It's funny too, because heading into the season, I always said Hero is gonna have just a huge breakout year. Nobody believed me, and then here we are. And I was lucky enough to draft him, and he's just been amazing all around.
He has. He's really taken up that usage. Kyle Lowry's really taken a back step in terms of playmaking. Jimmy Butler's actually had a disappointing season so far. It's only 2 weeks in, but he's taken a back seat to some of Tyler Hero's heroics.
Yeah, he's been close to putting up some triple doubles too, which is just fantastic.
Oh, he's been brilliant. Now, one of your boys, Scotty Barnes from the Raptors,
Just a stud.
fantastic, absolute stud. And I did not see this third year breakout, but he's just doing it all. Defensive stats is just so impressive. He's shooting the ball well. He's now got the 3-point confidence as well. He's just doing it all. Raptors are struggling, but he is a one-man band at this stage.
Yeah, I think that many expected him to take a leap, just not this far. Like right now, he's putting up, I think, top 10 value in points leagues, and he can do everything.
Yeah, this is absolutely his team. Pascal Siakam's had a really disappointing season, but some of that's been put down to Scotty Barnes just taking over. So Siakam, OG, been very, very quiet to start the season. Yes, just 2 weeks in, but Scotty Barnes has just been a stud, as you said. Chet Holmgren, similar to Wemby, just putting up unicorn type of stats. He's actually ranked higher than Wemby in terms of category leagues. He does it pretty much as well as Wemby. He had a 7-block game earlier in the season. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yep, he's making a great case for Rookie of the Year so far, and he's pretty versatile. He contributes to several stats. He's not just a defensive player, too.
Yeah, and he's just so important to what the Thunder can do as well. And I've said the Thunder are contenders, and people have sort of poo-pooed that idea, but I think he's actually integral to what they can do this season. Now, in contrast, the disappointments or the potential buy lows. We spoke about him earlier, but Pascal Siakam, usage is down from previous years. He's not getting the rebounds alongside of Jakob Poeltl. His shots are down as well. So just all across the board, he's had a really disappointing start to the season.
Yeah, and I think it's just crazy too, because a lot of people were going really high on Siakam just because of the loss of Van Vliet. So this performance so far has just been horrible. Last game, he recorded under 10 points. Like, what's that going to get you?
Yeah, and look, I was really down on him heading into the season. He was still being drafted around that ADP of 30, which was far too high for my liking. He hasn't been the ultimate in terms of shooting efficiencies, but he hasn't been this bad either. But as we said, with Scotty Barnes now running the team, Pascal Siakam's taken a back seat, and that's really been disappointing for his fantasy value. So hopefully he can turn it around. It is a buy low, but also I don't know if I can trust him down the stretch to be that top 50 guy. Perhaps he's going to sit outside of that top 50 range quite easily. DeMar DeRozan, now he's constantly been a key player for the Chicago Bulls, but he's had a really disappointing start to the season, as well as the rest of the Bulls squad. What can you say about DeMar?
It's actually funny because all over Twitter, I've just been seeing that DeMar's washed. And I wouldn't say that yet. He can still give you some quality points, but so far, just not what you're expecting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of calls for Chicago to blow it all up already. And again, it's only 2 weeks in, but they just look like a team that's going to settle for mediocrity. But DeMar DeRozan could be a trade piece at some stage, but he's just been really disappointing for the guys that did take him probably around that 50 range. Yeah, disappointing start. Now, even more disappointing, Julius Randle. I've never been big on Julius Randle, particularly in category leagues, but coupled with his poor attitude on the court, his output has just been atrocious.
Yeah, he's just going through it right now. His shooting efficiency is horrible. And on top of that, he hasn't really done much else besides rebounds, but hopefully he can turn it around because he tends to do this a lot where he goes through a slump for a long time and then all of a sudden he's like an all-star again. So we'll see how that goes.
And he's perennially a whipping boy for the Knicks supporters, and that fan base can be quite brutal as well. So some of the footage that's come out recently where he's just not getting back on defense, that won't bode well for his longevity on this team. But yeah, really disappointing for those that have him on the fantasy team. Jimmy Butler, we spoke about Hero's ascension, but Jimmy Butler's been quite slow this season. You could put that down to a little bit of nagging injuries as well. He's 1 year older. He's struggling a little bit, but I think that this is a buy low moment. He's going to miss games, of course, as we've seen over the last few seasons, but he hasn't been this bad for quite some time.
Yeah, it was really surprising too. And I was even looking at the rankings the other day in points leagues, and he's close to the 100 mark, which is just insane, especially after that magical run that they had in the playoffs. But like you said, it's that knee injury that's been plaguing him a little bit too. So it's just a waiting game just for him to get back into it.
Yeah, you make a good point around them going deep into the playoffs, and maybe that has some influence on how he's performing at the moment. So they're going to look after him because obviously they perform a lot better closer to the end of the season. But I really fear for the Heat.
Mhm.
I've got a feeling they may not even make the play-ins, let alone the playoffs. Jordan Poole, I've hyped him up. I hyped him up in the preseason, and he's been quite disappointing. So the minutes aren't there, the usage isn't there, the shot's not going in. Um, he is bringing some defensive stats with his steals, which is surprising and sort of keeping his value afloat. But he's still been very disappointing. But for me, I think he's a buy low.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say so far, though, that the pool party hasn't started yet. In points leagues, he's ranked closer to about 150, and his turnovers and efficiency have just been atrocious so far.
Yeah, yeah. I somewhat disregard turnovers, but those
Yeah.
that value those, Jordan Poole's been atrocious. If you look at it from the traditional nine cat rankings, I just think that it is a great opportunity for you to buy low on him because I think he's going to turn it around and turn it around quite quickly. Dame Lillard, he started with a bang in his first game with the Bucks, but he's really cooled off in the last few games for them. Some of this is probably a little bit of integration in the team, but then again, he went through that massive first game as well. So some poor shooting as well, coupled with Giannis probably still being the alpha on that team. What can you say about Dame?
Yeah, you basically covered all of it, but I actually have Lillard in one of my leagues. And after that first game, I was like, oh, okay, he's going to do pretty well here. Because at first I was nervous when drafting him. I was a little concerned about his role and his fits. And after that first game, it kind of calmed me down a little and I felt better about it. But then after that, it's been rough, especially in points leagues too. There was even one game where he only got me about 20 points, and that's practically nothing.
Yeah, and you probably spent top dollar on him as well. So he was going around that first round turn, around that 12, 13, 14 mark as well in category leagues. I think he can turn it around.
Yeah.
Obviously, the shots aren't going to be as prolific as they were in Portland, but I still think he's going to be a solid contributor moving forward. Another one of your guys, OG, we mentioned it with Pascal Siakam. OG's also had a downturn in his fantasy value, but unlike Pascal, his usage is around the same, but his game, his fantasy game, and his value is not predicated on high usage, but it's more around his defensive stats. And they've been okay, but his shooting has been off as well. Even his free throws, which are usually pretty steady, they're hovering in that mid 40s range, which is unbelievable. So I think he's got plenty of room to grow. Thoughts on OG?
Yeah, I think there's still time. It's not time to panic yet. We've even seen last year too how he's had some issues with those low shooting streaks, and that's just what we're seeing right now too. But like I said, it's just a waiting game. He'll turn it around hopefully eventually. But right now,
Yeah,
Scotty's just carrying the team.
yeah, I agree with you. Now, looking at some ads. So this is a combination of season-long ads, but also ads for this week. And that a lot of these, and you'll see shortly, a lot of these are related to injuries, which we'll also get into momentarily. First one, Dylan Brooks. So he's been on a heater, which is unbelievable. He's come out of the World Cup with Canada, and he's been in similar form, shooting great. And I don't think those shooting numbers are sustainable. It's just impossible for him to keep up such a high percentage of field goal percentage. But I think he's worthy of an ad this week, and he's looking really good on this Houston team. He's a mentor to the younger guys. He's worthy of an ad.
Yeah, I even read somewhere too that he was one of the top 3-point shooters in the league right now, which is just
Yeah.
mind boggling.
Yeah, in previous seasons, he's been a bit of a chucker, but
Mhm.
if you're punting field goals, no issues whatsoever. But he's actually been a positive with field goal percentage. So he's bringing the defense. He's always been an awesome defender. His perimeter defense is elite, but now it's actually been reflected in the box score with those steals as well. So absolutely, he's an ad. I've got Jalen Johnson and Gordon Hayward here. This shouldn't be a surprise. These guys should have already been owned, but there are a lot of leagues that haven't actually picked these guys up. They just have to be owned. I'm a fanboy of Jalen Johnson. I think he's going to be a top 50 player, if not this season, in seasons to come. So do yourself a favor. Make sure you go and grab these guys if they are floating around on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I picked up Jalen Johnson last week, and just amazing. Even
Yeah, and
Gordon
he's
Hayward too. Like he's worth picking up right now, especially with the whole Miles Bridges situation. He's set to be returning sometime soon. So
yeah. And Terry Rozier's gone out injured as well, so that'll boost up Gordon Hayward's value. But we know that Gordon Hayward's typically just an injury waiting to happen. But what you do, you ride it out. When he goes down, then you drop him for someone better. So not a big deal, but he has to be rostered at the moment. Now, I've got these two centers from Orlando with Wendell Carter Jr. going out, so he'll be out a minimum of 3 weeks, likely pushing out to that 4 to 5 week mark. But Goga Badadze started in the last game, which was a bit of a surprise to me over Mo Wagner. But Badadze is a much better shot blocker and will be able to get those the fantasy value for you very quickly. If I had to pick, I'd probably go Goga just for the upside, whilst Wendell Carter Jr. is out at the moment. Moving forward, so Dorian Finney-Smith. So again, overnight we got some news a little bit iffy in regards to Nick Claxton's health. Initially he was day-to-day, and he said that he was day-to-day, but it's looking like that with a high ankle sprain, he may actually be out longer term, so 6 to 8 weeks, which is really disappointing for the Nets. But good news if you have Dorian Finney-Smith on your team. So he's going to get more minutes, more usage, and they love running that small ball lineup as well. So a bit of Simmons, a bit of DFS as well. So I think he's a great add for this week and over the next few weeks until we get some clarity around what Nick Claxton's going to do in terms of his injury. Grant Williams, he's looked really solid next to Luka and Kyrie. So I think for the 3-point value, I think he's worthy of an add. He's not a must roster in my eyes, but I think he is worthy of being on rosters in 12-team standard leagues.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people expected him to even be worth rostering. So I'm surprised to see him at 50% as well. But like you said, he's been pretty solid so far, and I think he can continue that into the season.
Absolutely. And Tim Hardaway Jr. is in a similar boat, but for me, those are guys that are more streamable worthy as opposed to long-term plays. But Grant Williams is definitely worthy of a roster spot at this stage. Now, I've got two guys here, two guys from Detroit, rookie Marcus Sasser and Killian Hayes as well. So we've got Alec Burks out injured, probably day-to-day at this stage. Jaden Ivey didn't play the last game. Obviously, Monte Morris is out, and Bojan Bogdanovic, although not a guard, he's still one of the higher usage. He puts up a lot of shots. So these guys have the opportunity to thrive. And actually, Marcus Sasser's looked awesome. He looked very good overnight.
It's a little bit surprising that they're rostered so low too, because especially with Hayes, now that he's taken over that starting role a little bit more with Ivy sidelined on the bench.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Killian Hayes start ahead of Jaden Ivey, but now he's got more of a solidified role while the guys are out. But it's Sasser for me that's looked more impressive of the two. But this could be just a short-term ad. But yeah, like I said, he looked really impressive overnight. Speaking of short-term ads, Eric Gordon. So whilst Bradley Beal was still sidelined, and that could be days or it could be another week or two, Eric Gordon should be on rosters as well. So he played the back-to-back, so yesterday and the previous day, and he looked really impressive. Definitely worthy of an ad until we get more clarity on Bradley Beal's status. And Devin Booker also missed last game. So he's been in and he's been out. So make sure that Eric Gordon is on your roster if those two guys are going to miss. Malik Monk, similar sort of vein. So while De'Aaron Fox is sidelined, and that again could be days, Malik Monk is the guy to have. So he's my preference over Kevin Huerter. He's my preference over Davion Mitchell as well. So Malik Monk's looked electric, and he's just got that skill set as well. So he's quite streaky. But I recall last season where he had a 30 or a 40-point game just out of nowhere. So he can do that, and if you need that scoring punch, he's your man.
Yeah, I did stream him a couple games last year. And like you said, he is very streaky, but he has that potential to just explode.
Absolutely. Lou Dort, again, last game, SGA sat out. And we'll get into injuries shortly, but Lou Dort had a tremendous game. So if SGA misses some time, and it's looking like he may miss the next game and maybe even a little bit longer, Lou Dort should be on rosters. So with SGA out, you expect Josh Giddey to get some usage. Lou Dort, of course, Jalen Williams. Chet will get his anyway, but Lou Dort is worthy of a roster spot whilst SGA is on the sidelines. Now, I got the magic duo here of Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony. Again, this is related to Markelle Fultz being injured. He missed the last game, and he's questionable going into tomorrow's game as well. So My preference is Jalen Suggs because he does give you those defensive stats, and he's actually looked quite good. His shot can be up and down at times, and we've seen that over the last couple of seasons, but he's the more impressive pickup over Cole Anthony at this stage for me. Would you concur?
Yeah, I would also say Suggs. I've actually looked at streaming him a couple times, but he's been taken, unfortunately. But he's definitely someone to keep an eye on if he is available.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in a similar vein, Dyson Daniels and Jordan Hawkins, the reason why we put these guys here is they're not must roster, but with news overnight that CJ McCollum is going to miss an extended period of time with a collapsed lung, these are two considerations for your team. They're not must roster, as I said, but definitely worthy of consideration for standard leagues, but definitely for deeper leagues. Now, I've got these two grouped together, but Bismack Biyombo, again, he's come in. He started last game for Memphis, but having said that, Xavier Tillman was a last-minute out as well, and we'll get to that shortly, but I know that you suffered with Tillman being a late-minute out as well.
Yep, he was already locked into my starting lineup, and it may have cost me my matchup that week, but still, I think Biyombo is someone to monitor just to see how the minutes are going around.
I think so. It's low upside play, but if you need those blocks and traditional big man stats, he could provide that, particularly if Xavier Tillman continues to be on the sidelines. I just don't think that either one of those guys are the answer for Memphis moving forward. So people have suggested that it's time for Capella to be traded to them, which would be great because that would be nice for Capella himself. It'll also open up a lot of value for Okongwu over at Atlanta. So I've got a lot of confidence in Okongwu moving forward. Now, lastly, Reggie Jackson. So again, Jamal Murray is going to be sidelined for some time. So Reggie Jackson moves into that starting role at point guard at the Nuggets as well. So again, low upside, streaky shooter, but he's a consideration moving into week 3. Now, this is Miles Bridges, of course. So you love to hate him for obvious reasons, and I understand that. But when it comes down to fantasy, I think he's worthy of an ad, particularly if you have an IR slot. But I've posted on Twitter that he's actually due to return if he's not further sanctioned on the 17th of November. So it'll be a home game against the Bucks, which will be exciting. It'll change the dynamic significantly. Obviously, he's running mates with LaMelo Ball. It will have an impact on Brandon Miller, Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington. But I think he is worthy of an ad. Thoughts?
I think so too, especially if you have that empty spot, pick him up. That's what I did last week. He's set to return sometime soon, hopefully. It's still a little bit unclear. I feel like they haven't really been giving us a lot of updates on that, but still, someone to hold on to for now and just see how the whole situation goes.
Yeah, and I've actually held him in an ESPN league where suspended players aren't eligible for an IR or an IL. So I've held him, and it'll be going into 3.5 weeks by the time he returns. I think he's worthy of that, and I'm okay. And I mentioned it last week. I'm okay to take a couple of losses. I'm 1-1 in that league, so I'm going okay. And I've had James Harden out as well, so actually sitting pretty as well after 2 weeks. So if I can hold on until he returns, really awesome. I sent out a Twitter post or a poll the other day. 80% of people actually would like to pick him up. 20% don't think he's worthy of it, and that could just be for moral reasons, which I completely get. You don't want to root for him. You don't want to barrack for him. But I think for fantasy value, I think he's worthy of a roster spot. Now, drops Xavier Tillman, and this was irrespective of him missing more time. I just don't think the upside is there. And I said this as soon as we heard news about Steven Adams being out for the season. Xavier Tillman was the right choice to pick up at the time. I just don't think he has that upside as well. And we've now seen that with Biyombo coming into the team, those minutes could be split. So we'll see what happens when Tillman does return and Biyombo's in the side as well. I just don't think he's necessarily a must-roster player at this stage.
Yeah, at first I was really high on him, and I picked him up pretty early too. The only thing is that he's just been so inconsistent for me in points leagues, and he's probably someone that I will drop eventually if someone better comes along. It's hard.
Well, the last game that he played, he actually came off the bench. David Roddy started for the Grizzlies. He actually looked quite good. So per minute, he was fantastic. And he could actually come off the bench behind Biyombo moving forward. But let's see how that plays out. Next one, Harrison Barnes, another example of low upside plays. Solid without being spectacular. I think you can do better as your last roster spot as well. Take a flyer on a few guys. But Harrison Barnes, solid, but I don't think he's a must roster guy. So worthy of a drop.
Yeah, I think if anything, he's just more useful as a streamer option in the majority of leagues, at least.
Yeah, agreed. And same can be said with his teammate Kevin Herter. He's a streamer whilst De'Aaron Fox is out injured. But as soon as we hear that Fox is returning, I don't think Kevin Herter belongs on 12-team leagues. Next one, Sadiq Bey of Atlanta. Now, Jalen Johnson's taken over that starting role again. So they've mixed it up a little bit, but it's looking like Jalen Johnson's going to get the bulk share of those minutes ahead of Sadiq Bey. Sadiq Bey, again, he is okay as a streamer. I think he's fine as a streamer. And you can have him on a 12-team league, but again, I don't think the upside is there for him to be must roster. Now, next guy, one of your guys, I think it's an easy drop. I don't think you need to bother having Gary Trent Jr. on your roster.
For me, he is a definite drop. Even in categories leagues too. Like I had him last year and he only really contributes to threes, points, and then some steals here and there. But this season we haven't really seen much of that yet outside of points.
Yeah, and coming off the bench, he's just not enough usage, not enough minutes for him to be valuable as well. So I think that's an easy drop in standard leagues. Karis LeVert, again, that's not for everyone, but now that Darius Garland's back, Jarrett Allen to a degree impacts that as well. So there's just less minutes, more mouths to feed. So Karis LeVert, again, not must roster in 12 teams. So he's considering, I think he's consideration of a drop in 12 teamers. Same can be said about Isaac Okoro. He missed yesterday's game. Same boat, if not worse than Karis LeVert. So he's a streamer once he is back, but that's all I see him as. Next one could be controversial. Isaiah Stewart. So he's the starting power forward, of course, for the Pistons. He looked really good in the first week, but he's come back down to earth. And I just don't think, again, doesn't have that upside to be a must roster player.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He's more of a streamer option for me as well.
This one here is probably also a little bit controversial, but Benedict Mathurin, he is the starter ahead of Buddy Hield, but I just don't think he does enough apart from scoring and threes to be a must roster guy in standard leagues.
Yeah, even in my leagues too, a lot of people dropped him. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So in points leagues, he's not necessarily a must roster guy. Okay, that is interesting. Okay. Jaden Ivey, so out injured last game. Again, like we said, so a couple of guys ahead of him. I just don't think he's worthy on a 12-team league, and particularly in category leagues where he does hurt you in both percentages. Colin Sexton, we've seen the plethora of guards for the Jazz, and I think he's just one of many. So again, he doesn't offer much outside of scoring, and we've mentioned it in previous episodes. Even at his peak, while he was in Cleveland, he really didn't offer you much outside of scoring. And he was always hovering around that top 80 to 100 at his very peak. So again, I don't think now in his current situation in Utah, he's worthy of a 12-team roster spot.
Yep, and he could be very inconsistent at times as well.
Yeah, and I think everyone's just waiting for Keontae George to break out and hopefully gets that starting role at some stage. Taylor Horton-Tucker is another guy that I think he's worthy of a roster spot, but again, things could change very, very quickly. Now, two Warriors to end this with Jonathan Kuminga. I think he's just a streamer now that everyone is healthy. The last one's controversial. Do you want to talk about Andrew Wiggins?
So actually, in a lot of points leagues, he's been dropped. He's still 80% rostered in Yahoo leagues, but overall, he has just been horrible so far.
Yeah, probably even tougher to own in category leagues, but I still have the faith that he's going to turn it around. So it's a consideration. I don't think you need to drop him at this stage. I think he can turn things around, but definitely something to watch out for. Just some notable injuries. We won't spend too long on this slide, but CJ McCollum, obviously, he'll be out for weeks. We haven't got an absolute definite timeline, but I would expect something along the lines of 2 months, perhaps 6 to 8 weeks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, very short term with his knee sprain, but this could last days or it could last a week or so. But again, we look for those guys like Lou Dort, Giddy, Casson Wallace, even to start getting some value whilst SGA is on the sidelines. Terry Rozier had a groin injury. I think he's considered questionable. He's day-to-day at this stage, but if he does remain out, like we said, there's a little bit more value for Gordon Hayward, Brandon Miller as well. De'Aaron Fox with his ankle sprain, I expect him to return sometime this week, but he could be out another 1 or 2 games. And like we said, Malik Monk is the guy to have there. Jamal Murray, hamstring strain. If they're cautious with him, which they should be as the champions and going really well at the moment, I expect him to be out probably about a week, but he could come back sooner than that. But this is where Reggie Jackson picks up a little bit more minutes and some more usage there. Now, Devin Vassell, Greg Popovich came out saying that he's probably going to be out for a while. Next minute, the Wild turns into day-to-day. So he's actually questionable for the next game. So we'll see what happens with that groin injury. But that's really good news for the Spurs because he's an extremely important component of what they're trying to achieve. Wendell Carter Jr., we spoke about him, but he's out for a minimum 3 weeks. So he'll be reevaluated in 3 weeks. Doesn't mean he's coming back in 3 weeks, but he's got that fracture in his hand. So as we said, Mo Wagner and Goga Badadze pick up some minutes there. And sneakily, look out for Jonathan Isaac. Not worthy of a roster spot, but just keep an eye out because he's a permanent beast, particularly in category leagues. We spoke about Nick Claxton. It came out overnight that he's actually said he's got a high ankle sprain, which typically means it's a 6 to 8 week timeline. But he's saying day to day. But we know that players sometimes underestimate how long it takes to come back from recovery, from injury. Any thoughts on Nick Claxton?
Someone was actually trying to trade me Claxton already. But I'm a little hesitant on him. I think he's going to be out closer to the longer time. But like you said before, players they want to be back as soon as they can. And a lot of times that isn't the case. But just something to monitor as the season goes on.
Absolutely. Now, his teammate Cam Johnson, a lot shorter time frame, so he could be back in the squad within a week, which impacts Cam Thomas. So Cam for Cam. Let's see what happens with Cam Johnson. He has to be on rosters. He was looking really good for Team USA during the World Cup, and I think he's just primed for a breakout once he does return. Bojan Bogdanovic, we spoke about him last episode, but he's out for another 3 weeks. And once he does return, I think he will actually start ahead of Isaiah Stewart at the 4. So look out for that. But he will impact on the usage of some of the other guys as well. Tari Eason, he's out for another 1 to 2 weeks. A lot of mouths to feed in Houston, but he's a bit of a fantasy favorite. So if he gets the time and the playing time, I think he can be worthy of a roster spot, but really back end in terms of 12 teamers, but don't need to add him at this stage. Now, the Suns, Devin Booker missed last game, but I think he's questionable for the next. Bradley Beal was a little bit longer, but he was seen putting up a lot of shots and actually looked quite impressive in his movement. So he could be back within a week. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the big three actually combine because it's been KD doing everything by himself with a little bit of help from Eric Gordon, as I was saying earlier. And finally, Anthony Simons, he's still around that 5 weeks away. But if you've got that IR slot, you just have to keep him in there because he, again, I think he's going to be him and Shaedon Sharpe, the most important players on that Portland team. Finally, the week 3 schedule. I won't go through every team, but just something notable. Cleveland do have a 2-game week, as do the Trailblazers and your guys, the Toronto Raptors. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, honestly, the Raptors are just one of the biggest teams to keep an eye on right now, especially with, we talked about it before, Siakam, OG. Hopefully that's something that they can start to turn around this week. And the Trailblazers too. A lot of guys have been shining on that team. I've been very high on Aiden. He's been fantastic for me lately. And Cleveland too. Mobley, someone to keep an eye on for sure. Even Garland, I know he's been dealing with some injuries, but Mitchell has been one of the top players so far.
Yeah, top 5 fantasy asset in both categories and points. But yet Garland will probably impact that. And as I said, Garland returning will impact some of those lesser likes. Jarrett Allen is really important for the Cavs, and that will probably also impact on Mobley as well moving forward. But yeah, interesting week. Not a great deal of streaming to be had. So it's one of those weeks where you can probably sit on a guy and, stash away. And prime example would be Miles Bridges. So utilize that this week. But yeah, it's going to be a massive week in store. Now, Kayla, any final words before we call it a day?
I think the biggest thing is just to watch out for injuries. We have a lot of guys who are reportedly returning this week, but those
Yep.
also could turn out to be longer injuries than expected too. And even Miles Bridges too, possible return sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's keep an eye out. Now, of course, let's give us a follow on Twitter, Kayla_Fonte, and myself at NBA Fantasy Bible. So without further ado, I will bid you farewell. Thank you guys, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Kayla. See you guys.
Bye.